it's my pleasure to bring into the room Sarah Armentrout, and she will be she's with International Para Equestrian Dressage. And Sarah, let me turn the microphone over to you.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm still not able to see anything on the screen, so I'll look to you to help me know what the questions are.
That's what I'm here for, Sarah. But again, we encourage the audience to send in those questions. That's what this breakout session is all about.
And can everybody hear me okay?
We can.
So, who do we have with us? Am I allowed to ask that question?
Well, we have well over 130 people from all across the country and a few international folks.
Okay, so I think what I wanted to present today was the Paraequestrian initiative for veterans that I have been shepherding along through the Department of Veterans Affairs, and we have a international, or I should say national grant with the VA, and this is done in partnership with the United States Equestrian Federation and with PATH International. And our goals really are for pipeline development for veterans with who are para-eligible, meaning they're Paralympic eligible, so they have various disabling conditions that would allow them to be eligible for this international sport. The two sports that we are representing are para-dressage and para-driving, and those are two FEI international sports governed internationally, and they're well-developed sports across the world. They're represented at the World Equestrian Games, and para-dressage is the only Paralympic equestrian sport represented at the Paralympics. So my charge has been over the last 2 years to help veterans who are para-eligible know that this is a sport avenue for them, a competitive track that they can get involved with, have awareness for. And a lot of us in our PATH centers have veterans we're working with who may want to go further with their riding and identify as athletes who would really enjoy this level of participation. And part of that pipeline development is really looking at the grassroots to see what we can do at the grassroots level to include people in local schooling shows in para-dressage and para-driving, all the way through regional competition and national one-star competition, and to the degree that people become proficient enough that they can get to the international level of Paralympic, or in the case of para-driving, which is not a Paralympic sport, but is an FEI sport, international sport, that they can compete at that level. We have our first veteran who is taking advantage of the Veterans Monthly Assistance Training Allowance. I'm not sure I got that completely right, but it's the VMAA, Veterans Monthly Assistance Allowance, and we have our first veteran in para-dressage who's taking advantage of that. And really, this pipeline is trying to connect people to those federal funds that are helping with training grants that support showing and clinics and training of the horse and rider, to aid them and essentially act as a sponsor within that sport pursuit. So a lot of my job has been spent on athlete development around the country, coach education, as well as helping veterans become classified within the sport. The whole undertaking is being done through the Centers of Excellence, which is the Paraequestrian Centers of Excellence that are created through the United States Equestrian Federation and the United States Paraequestrian Association. And there are 6 centers of excellence around the country, and that number is growing. 6 para-dressage centers, and I believe para-driving will be coming online relatively soon through through USEF. And so one of our jobs has been to host these training camps and coach education forums with the head of sport, Michelle Asseline, who is the head coach for para-dressage. We've been hosting very large pilot programs for coach education, as well as trying to involve veteran athletes in the sport and also get them classified so that they can get underway. So it's a whole new initiative. We have a lot of information on our website. It's also on the USEF website, but I believe the link that's provided today is all of the webinars that were created. They're recorded webinars on an introduction to para-dressage, introduction to para-driving, and then classification. And then there's a flyer specific to the initiative for veterans. So that was a kind of a quick overview, but I'm happy to take questions. I don't know if I should be giving any more information at this point, or if it's really meant to be more of a Q&A.
Well, a little bit of both. And, again, it's primarily about Q&A, and we haven't received any questions yet, but I encourage you to participate, and get value out of this breakout session by asking questions. Send it into the Q&A box at the very bottom of your screen and click send. Only our presenter will see the question, and we'll address it verbally as time permits. But we've provided a half hour for this breakout session, so go ahead and submit those questions, and we'll address those. Okay, we do have a comment that thank you, and they have bookmarked the website. And I should pass along that on this slide where it says at the bottom, click here for more information. That is an active link, and you can certainly click on that and go to the website. We do have a question here for you asking, we're starting our veterans program. How can we incorporate para-equestrian dressage?
Well, I think, there's a lot of factors including para-dressage, and the United States Para-Equestrian Association is a great place to go to look for sort of the how-tos on para-equestrian. There's also, as I said, the coach education. We've just finished piloting 25 coaches through the initial pilot program that also the VA helped to fund. And so there will be more and more coaches, and a lot of those coaches that went through that program are PATH certified coaches wanting to understand how to add para-equestrian into their program lineup at the PATH centers. I can tell you at Carlisle Academy, which I'm head of school here in Maine, we separate out what part is therapy and what part is sport. So it's at the point at which someone is ready to graduate from more of a therapeutic provision of services or environment, or with that sort of goal setting, and they shift their focus to be more athlete-minded and athlete-focused, and it has a sport kind of overview, and the goals are different, and it's less about, we all know inherently that the therapy will remain intact in terms of the therapeutic benefit of riding and being with horses, but the purpose of the lessons and the training becomes more sport-oriented, and they think about what horse shows they might want to go to. But the most important thing is to start small and be incremental in helping people move along that pipeline. So an example would be if we had a veteran that had started out in adaptive riding or therapeutic riding, they might shift over to our recreational program, or if they are in fact para-eligible, we will include them in those lessons that with an instructor that has a little more advanced training in dressage, and can start them in on some of the introductory para tests within that person's grade, which there are 5 grades in para-equestrian, the lowest grade being the most involved with disabilities, and the highest grade being 5, being closer to able-bodied. And within those grades, the tests become more advanced, harder movements, higher gaits. So at the lower grades, you're going to have a walk only, and all the way up to grade 5, you're going to have walk, track, canter, some lateral movement, and things that are equivalent to a 3rd or 4th level dressage test in able-bodied. So I think to the degree that somebody in your program has some dressage training and a dressage background and can start looking at some of those introductory para tests, and to the extent that a veteran who's interested can become classified, and that does require finding a national classifier. And all of this information, I will reiterate, is in these PowerPoints that are, it's a total of 3 hours of continuing ed that has been approved by PATS. And all of the extra links, it's kind of a whole nother world out there of rules and regulations and classification, and all of this stuff is in those webinars. So I would say start small, find somebody with a background. A lot of the PATH instructors who came to us who were looking at the coach program might have had a USDF bronze medal. They might have been competitors themselves. They might have had, again, just advanced training and a certification beyond a PATH certification, so that would give them that extra eye and extra experience for helping someone move into paradressage. So I hope that's helpful.
We have another question saying, I missed the deadline for the coaching pilot program. Will there be another opportunity?
Yes, there definitely be more opportunities. We are actually going to be unveiling so the pilot happened at 2 locations, one here in Maine in May, and the second was down at Wheatland Farm in Virginia, and that was in July. And so we ran through the first pilot. We needed to wrap that part up in the beginning of the year, and now we've moved on to the official launch, which will be 2019 in January. And the information for the official USDF paradressage certification will be actually unveiled at the PATH National Conference in October of this year. So there will be an announcement of more opportunities that will come up in 2019, and that will actually shift to the official certification program beyond the pilot. I believe, too, having said that, there are 2 centers of excellence, one in Texas and one in California, who will be hosting, I don't know if it'll be a full pilot, but it'll be further coach training, and that will happen in both, I want to say, December and November. And I'm happy to forward more information along through that, and the other person who could be contacted is Laureen Johnson at the United States Equestrian Federation. Again, her info is all over those webinars, and she has a website or web address that you can link in if you go to those webinars. But she is the paraequestrian director at the United States Equestrian Federation and knows all of the dates and all of the plans for continuing pilots and official programs.
Okay, and that pretty much answers something typed into this discussion asking about coaching programs scheduled on the West Coast. We do have an attendee here today saying they're interested in schooling for dressage. Now, is it possible for veterans who are interested to visit your program? She says they already have veterans in Kentucky and Tennessee interested.
So is the question about sort of having a training clinic or to have a coach go down and help with their program down there?
Okay, well, hopefully this person will type in more information on that.
Okay. Well, I'll keep talking. I guess the long and short of it is I believe the Centers of Excellence are a great place. Any of the 6 that are registered, again, they're on the USDF website. They're on those webinars as well, all listed. There's probably more that are being added next year in 2019, maybe even perhaps more in 2018 for the Centers of Excellence in Paradressage. And I think those are great places to go to as regional hubs and regional resources to connect with for either bringing athletes to those centers or having your PATH coaches go to those centers and seek further training or even mentoring in how do you start a paraequestrian program. People are more than welcome to come here to Maine as well. That is part of the job of the Centers of Excellence, is to be a resource for able-bodied dressage programs as well as PATH centers that want to help link into paraequestrian sport.
And so you're located in Maine. That's one of the questions asking, where are you located in Maine?
We're in southern Maine. It's not exactly the hotbed of equestrian sport, but it's a great place to live. So yes, we are one of the regional COEs, what we call the COEs.
Okay, wonderful. Next question, or they're just asking you to talk more about the coach education. What does it consist of?
So Michelle Athaline is part of, obviously, he's heading up this coach initiative, and he is the head coach of the para-equestrian or the para-dressage team in the U.S. He was 12 years the head coach in an undefeated British team. They were undefeated in the Paralympics for 12 years. So he's completed his tenure there, and he's now coaching the U.S. team, which we're very, very fortunate to have him with us, and he's doing really a soup to nuts development in both athlete and coach development. So it consists of, there's actually a whole timeline. It's anywhere from a 3 to 9 month process, depending on where someone will come in, either as an apprentice coach, learning just really at the beginning level of taking athletes into para-equestrian. They're working with a more senior coach, all the way through a master coach level. So not unlike a PASS certification and the various criteria that go along with that, but it covers essentially 4 modules, and the modules are, one is coaching philosophy. Michelle has been very definite that a bedrock of coaching philosophy is one of the most important aspects to creating a good, solid coach program, and essentially our orientation with how we coach people, our methodology, communication, feedback loop, all of that. Some of those soft skills that aren't necessarily the technical riding skills, but are all part of a sound coaching philosophy, and he's bringing that from his years of experience and also his background in UK sport program that he took while in England. So coaching philosophy is one of the modules. The second module is sport-specific, and that is really where you get into the nuts and bolts of how do you do para-equestrian dressage, and eventually para-equestrian driving will have a similar focus, but this Michelle's coach program right now is really for para-dressage. And then the other piece is technical riding skills, technical riding and training skills, so that's more, again, back to the German riding. The German Federation has principles of riding, and that, again, is sort of the gospel of classical dressage training. So all of that stays intact and is the same, and we talk about how, again, that is the foundational piece to dressage training, and then how do we make those adaptations related to para-dressage. Because para simply means parallel. It's parallel to able-bodied sports. So we don't want to have any more adaptations than is needed. The classification system helps to create and level the playing field among the athletes, so that there's a leveling of the disabling or the impairments, and that the tests themselves, everything tends to level out within the classification. But the whole point is to keep it as close to traditional able-bodied dressage as possible, including the training of the athlete and the training of the horse. And so it's back to those foundational skills. And the last piece is equine management and care. So again, a lot of us already have that in our bailiwick, and this is really the dressage and para-dressage, perspective on that. So it's a really solid program. The first 2 modules are mandatory. The last 2 are not mandatory. They're optional. They're just more for continuing edification. But the first 2, being sport-specific and coaching philosophy, are the compulsory training modules that can be done within a 2-day period at a Centers of Excellence. And so that's part of the unveiling we're going to do at PATH, is to look at that whole timeline and roadmap and how all the mechanics of this coach certification will unfold.
And perhaps you touched on this a little bit ago, but Next question is asking, how do we become a coach so that we can offer that option to our participants? Already PATH certified, but missed the July opportunity.
Yeah, again, just back to there will be a big announcement at the PATH conference in October about what is going to be the official launch of the USEF Paraequestrian Dressage Coach Certification Program, and it's quite an involved undertaking. It's been a year in creation. There's lots of parts of the curriculum and also lots of reading and required reading and recommended reading. So it's really a rich curriculum. So more will be made available and aware for all PATH instructors in October, and that there will be a schedule of events starting January 2019.
Okay, now flipping back to an earlier question where we requested a little bit more information about veterans interested to visit your program, already have veterans in Kentucky and Tennessee interested about it. They clarify a little bit more, saying they're interested, it's more about getting classified for athletes. So any follow-up on that?
So it sounds like the question is about how do athletes become classified?
I believe so.
So classification, again, just to harp on go back to the webinars, there's a whole PowerPoint in classification itself that I would encourage anybody to look at. It's about 45 minutes, and that is done by a national classifier. We recorded that session, and that's Carrie Sowers. She's actually an international FEI classifier. So there's two types of classification. One is national and one is international. I believe the rule as of today is that any new athlete has to become nationally classified before they become internationally classified. And the international classifications right now are only done at the major competitions, meaning a 3-star international competition in paradressage or a WEG, or no, probably not a WEG, but some of the major competitions. A national classification we have been trying to hold at the centers of excellence and some smaller venues. So the first step is national classification, and USEF is actually going to be adding more national classifiers, and those are people who are physical therapists and MDs, and there's a whole process of becoming a licensed official through USEF for national classification, and that is its own process unto itself. But national classification is becoming more and more available, and we've made a big push to have classification available every time we host a athlete event at the Centers of Excellence or a coach event. We have classification available to any athlete who thinks they might be para-eligible and who thinks they have interest in competitive para-equestrian sports.
Right. A question typed into the session discussion, visible to all of us, but maybe you have some thoughts on this. They say they work with military veterans, and they found some interest expressed in cowboy dressage. Do you know if there are any resources available for this discipline?
So there a couple of the Western-oriented sports that are, I think, coming more and more on the fore. One is para-reining. Para-reining right now is not an international sport. I believe I won't venture to say I don't want to be misquoted in saying exactly what it is, but it's becoming more and more recognized. But it isn't an FEI or an international sport, and because of that, it isn't one of the sports that the VA then assigns a training allowance to. So the difference with the pipeline that I'm helping to grow and initiate with the Centers of Excellence is really for para-dressage and para-driving, because those are international recognized sports, and they have the veterans training allowance tied to it should someone meet the criteria of getting certain scores and competing at a certain level. They can tap into this federal funding. Having said that, it doesn't mean that at the grassroots and regional levels and even at national levels that para-reining isn't a great option for some veterans who are interested in more of the, as you say, cowboy sports or Western disciplines. The other discipline that could be very appealing to some veterans is Western dressage, and there is a para-Western dressage division. Again, quite small, not internationally recognized, but has some regional and national roots to it. So those are also appealing Western type sports for para. And then I guess the final thing I'll say is the driving also has great appeal because it's, and I'm not going to be an expert to speak to that. There are driving programs out there doing a lot of this already, and I believe there's going to be more para-driving centers of excellence opening up in 2019. So those will be also great resources. But driving is a fast sport. It's really an exciting. There's 3 phases to driving that follows the combined driving. It parallels combined driving. So you have a marathon phase, which is fast and furious. You have a clone phase, and then more of a driven dressage for precision and accuracy and obedience. So that's a very compelling, fun, and fast-paced sport that could also have great appeal for those folks looking for something a little more action-packed.
And Sarah, funding is always very important. Next question is asking, what's the process for obtaining funding support for a veteran to participate in para-equestrian training?
So the funding is the only solid, what I'll say about funding is I think for all of our past centers, a lot of us have access to funding for veterans. I think it's completely appropriate to open that funding up, obviously with full disclosure that you open that funding up to veterans also wanting to pursue para-equestrian sport. The only solid and consistent funding that's not center to center but is more federally driven is the Veterans Monthly Assistance Allowance that I talked about. And again, there are links all through those webinars that bring you right to that information. And that's more at the tail end of the pipeline. Once you've already gotten into the sport, there's training and a leveling up that's taken place, and you're in and competitive and already performing at recognized events and scoring at certain levels. And the criteria is all listed. So if that is in place, as I said, we have one of our first veterans is taking advantage of that, Bob Giles, and he is in para-driving, and he's actually at the World Championships right now in para-driving, and he is a veteran taking advantage of he's been in para-driving for many, many years, but he is also, to my knowledge, accessing those funds. So that's federal funding, and then I believe, for all of our programs, we all are very creative about how we tap into our local and grassroots funding for these initiatives.
And with that, I'm afraid we're out of time for questions, but Sarah, I want to thank you for a terrific breakout session. You've passed along a lot of terrific information about para-equestrian dressage. So thank you very much. Any last-minute thoughts?
No, I just want to say thank you for including me in the breakout. And as I said, the webinars I hope are very helpful to fill in the gaps. It's a vast sport knowledge out there, and there's a lot to take in. But I think it's such an exciting opportunity for athletes and in particular veterans who want to go further in these sports. So I'm always available as a resource if people want to contact me, and I'm always happy to help move things along. So thanks for including me.
Okay, and thank you for being part of a terrific day here with PATH International.